Hi, John.
Hello.
Hi everyone, this is Kim. I've known John for like 1 year. How we got to know each other will be a story for another day. But today we just want to find out a little bit about this journey that he's been taking, which is kind of not something that I would personally have thought is common to see in my friends or somebody his age. Yeah, maybe we can start with John. Maybe you can tell us a bit about what are the different hats you're wearing now and what you're doing.
Right. So, firstly, I'm a husband today. Yay. So, I got married last year, November 2022. Yeah, so I'm a husband. Officially, my primary career now is a financial consultant. So, I'm under Prudential in an agency called Eminence. And aside from that, I also have a side hustle where I co founded a wedding videography business with my wife, and it's called Couple of Moments. And aside from that, also recently, I am a community manager where I match fresh grads with pretty established professionals in the workplace where they mentor each other. I mean, it's a mentorship program and they learn from each other, and I allow these fresh grads to have a little step up in their career progression. Yep, so that's a rough summary of what I'm doing right now. Yep.
That's quite a long list of things.
Yes.
So, okay, before we talk about the Jonathan today, maybe we can dial back a little bit to let's start 10 years ago. What were the things that was on 15-year-old Jonathan's heart? What was important to him? What was motivating him? Yeah.
So 15 years, when I was 15 years old, I think I was pretty lost in life, to be honest. So I wasn't doing that well in school. Like I was doing good. My PSLE score was 238, if that matters. I went into a neighborhood school in Clementi Town, and towards O levels, I think life got a bit more confusing because before that, I'm the kind of guy who would study last minute and still do pretty well. But that didn't really work out for O levels, and it didn't really work out even more for poly and uni. So I was still trying to figure myself out back then. I had my first relationship when I was 15 as well, and it was alright. Like I had pretty memorable experiences, but at the same time, like there was a lot of frustration, a lot of questioning, like what exactly is love about? What exactly is marriage? This ambiguous social construct that people always talk about, but yet I didn't really know what to make sense, like how to make sense of all of that. And at the same time, I didn't understand what career meant because I was pretty interested in math and science, but at the same time, I wasn't doing that well. But yet, I couldn't stand reading, so I knew that like social arts wasn't going to be for me, even though I was deeply curious about people and how to understand people as well. And I think back then, I was also pretty crazy about South Korea. Like I watched Running Man a lot, and that slowly transitioned towards my interest towards North Korea. And I remember back then when I was 15 years old, a part of me wanted to be a missionary in North Korea too. And thinking back, it's pretty funny, but yeah, I remember feeling so burdened for the people in North Korea because I was reading this book about people in prison camps in North Korea, how they live their lives, how they have no freedom at all, and how there's pretty much no hope for their whole lives ahead. And while I'm pretty comfortable in Singapore, I wish that there was something I could do to level out the playing ground a little bit to help these people have a little more hope in their lives and a little bit more joy in their day-to-day living too. Yep, so that's what 15-year-old Jonathan was concerned about.
Okay. Um, so, underlying like those many reflections that you're having and really good thoughts that you're having in terms of your academics, your career, your relationships, and your purpose in life, what would you say were your biggest struggles at when you were 15 years old?
Right. I think when I was 15, I struggled quite a bit with my love life. I think back then, like, the idea of being in a relationship was a really, really big thing to me. Like, it was something that I knew for a fact that I want for my future self to be to be married, to have a lasting love life, one that was meaningful, one that was central to my life. And I didn't know how to express myself back then. I was really, really awkward. So sorry to all the girls I've creeped out in the last like 10 years of my existence or 25 years of my existence. But I think in that stage, I was trying to figure out how to interact with people while trying to make sense of who I am as a person. Do I pride myself for my academics? Do I do I pride myself for my ability to be able to woo someone? Yeah, and like it's easy to please someone, but it's another to be natural in my pleasing of a person. And I think back then, my own identity was fluctuating a lot. Like there was no grounding of who Jonathan is. Yeah, and that was extremely confusing. And it was later on, like it was only 2-3 years ago when I realized I have ADHD. So this whole figuring out of my own identity was extremely confusing from my secondary school to poly phase, just because I knew that I could do better, but my grades didn't show that, my relationship didn't show that, my own figuring out of my own career path didn't show that as well. So life felt extremely demoralizing when results weren't showing for the hard work I was putting in. I knew that I could be contributing more to the people around me, but yet I felt so limited and finite within my own capacity, and I didn't know what to do about it back then. Yeah.
Okay. So, I think what I'm hearing from your sharing is actually a lot of it had to do with identity. Even identity was kind of the thing that was undergirding the relationship struggles. Would I be right to say that? And if so, I'm just curious, and I'm jumping off script here, is how about now? Like, I know you would probably tell us a little bit more later on about what you're doing now and what motivates you now. But could you give us like a bit of a teaser? How have you progressed in that whole search for who you really are, for your identity?
Right. I think something liberating that I learned along the past few years was the fact that I don't need to be labeled by societal constructs. Like just because a part of my brain is somewhat abnormal for most people, I don't need to be labeled by my ADHD. Just because I studied engineering doesn't mean that I have to be known as an engineer for the rest of my life. I'm not limited by the school I came from, my family background, and that opened up so many things where I realized that, okay, I can pretty much create my own career path. I can study whatever I want if I'm not limited to the platform in which I study. And I can make sense of my own love life too, where I don't need to follow someone else's roadmap to how they figure out love and marriage and family. I can make sense of it for myself too, and that's when I spend a lot more time figuring out my whys behind why I do all these things before chasing it blindly and following the societal norm today. Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting, and I think it really transitions well into our next question, which is, who is Jonathan today?
Right. So apt, right? So Jonathan today is a curious kid. Like, I acknowledge that there's so much I don't know. This world is so big, so grand, so beautiful. Like, yes, there's so much brokenness that we see today in society, in parliament, in marriages. But yet, there's still so much potential for goodness, and I'm curious to know what that means. So for me, I believe that there's such a thing as design, which means there's potentially also a designer to all these things. Yeah, so I want to figure out like what what's the intended design for marriage, what's the intended design for work, for friendships, for the financial system, for technology. Like, there's just so much potential for goodness, and I want to figure out what the end goal can potentially be. And I want to bring people along this journey because I'm someone that's pretty driven by pain. Like, I felt pretty alone in my teenage years when I had so many questions but no answers, and there weren't that many people in my life that I could turn to. And who I want to be today is to be that person for someone else younger than me, where I might not have all the answers today, but at least these people don't have to feel alone in their struggle of questioning and searching for meaning in life and answers to what design could potentially be. Yeah, and I want to be known for my curiosity and love for people to journey along with them to search for these answers together.
Okay. Just to pick up on something that you mentioned, I'm curious, why do you say there's a designer? Like, why do you repeated a few times that there is a design in work, there's a design in relationship. Why do you say that?
Right. I think I was brought up Christian, but there was a phase in my life when I knew for a fact that this better be everything to me or it means nothing to me at all. So we're currently filming this in the church I grew up in. Yeah, there was a point in time when I spent 6 days a week here, just because I was just so stretched in my ministries. People needed help, like the old people needed help, the youngsters needed help, many different services needed help, and I knew for a fact that if I'm going to spend so much time devoting to this God I cannot see, this thing better be real. Or I'm not gonna waste so much of my time for these things. Yeah, so in my search for meaning in life, I looked up many different religions, and I think as an engineer, as a scientist-ish, I realized that the more complex things are, the more it points towards the designer. The more I look at how intentional things are around me, the more I realize that, hey, there can be so much potential for good if we follow these intended, if we were to enjoy these things in the intended design. Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful for me to understand, yeah, what you meant by that. Okay, so now kind of just coming back to what you shared about the Jonathan from the past and the Jonathan today. What has changed from 10 years ago? Okay, that's the first question. But what has not changed from 10 years ago? That's the second question.
I think Jonathan today is a lot more mature, I hope. I think Jonathan today is less limited by his unconstructive beliefs. Like, because back then I was quite fearful of life. Like, I was constantly doubting myself because I never stood out from my peers. My grades weren't that good. I'm not very outspoken. I didn't perform that well in sports and academics and everything. I was just known to be that jacks of all trades guy who could roughly do anything, but isn't really that great in anything. And I think it's only after university when I realized that I don't have to be defined by my lousy GPA. I don't have to be defined by my lack of progression in my career. And there's so much potential for me to figure out who I am and what my own strengths are without being limited by the rigid constructs that are already out there. Yeah, so I feel so free today. Like, I may not be anywhere today, but I know that there's so much room for my own growth today, and I'm excited for that. I'm a lot more excited and motivated to live life today because I know that anything is possible. Yeah.
Okay.
So what's the second question
Second one
again?
is, then what has not changed from 10 years ago?
I think I'm still a very people-centric person. Like the Jonathan who cared for strangers in North Korea back then is still somewhat the same Jonathan today, where I still care for the people who are less privileged. And at the end of the day, I hope to make this world a better place, as cringy and cliche as it sounds. And I realize that I cannot care for someone if I can't properly care for myself first, if I'm not at a place of mental, physical stability. Yeah, I would not have the capacity for anyone else. And it's one thing for me to maybe give 1,000 people $1. That may mean a lot to them. But I think it may potentially do more if I were to figure myself out first, to allow myself to fly as high as I can and bring people along with me along the way, and to be really, really good and intentional with something rather than be everywhere but nowhere at the same time. Yeah, so I think while I really, really love people still, I think I'm a lot more intentional and focused today, and hopefully through that I can more effectively serve the people I love. Yeah.
Okay. What are some struggles you are still working through today?
I think Jonathan is still insecure today. So back then, Jonathan didn't do very well in many aspects of his life, and he tried to validate himself through his grades, through his love life, through his side hustles. And to some extent, that's still evident today, where I'm still trying to prove to people that I'm worth it, that it's a good thing to trust me. I mean, there's definitely benefits of that, but at the same time, I'm still a people pleaser, and I acknowledge that. And that can potentially bring out so much good because I bring value to people in the best ways possible, but it also means that my own identity is still extremely shaky and fluff. Yeah, so I'm learning to not live just for the sake of pleasing people and feeling insecure and feeling unconfident of myself, but rather to be more secure, and with that security and confidence, I can love and serve people properly as well. Yeah.
That's really brave of you to be willing to share that with me, and I guess with the other friends who are watching this video as well. And I'm just curious, like, identity was something you mentioned 15-year-old Jonathan struggled with, and now 10 years later, identity is still something that you are working through. You might have already answered this, but what is different about that struggle? It sounds like it's the same undergirding questions, but what is different about how you approach the struggle of identity now?
I'm more bold to acknowledge my weaknesses today, to own the fact that I'm not perfect, and that's okay. I'm not the best at studying, I'm not the best at reading books physically, I'm not the best at organizing things. I'm terrible at organizing my life, to be honest. But because I can have the capacity to acknowledge these things, I can overcome them by finding people to help me along the way, by finding better platforms for me to learn. And that opens up my own potential to so much more. I'm limited because I can acknowledge my playing field. I have so much more freedom to play within my playing field with confidence and not fearing that things may not work out, because I know my own strengths by acknowledging my weaknesses as well. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's really helpful because you are kind of modeling for us humility. Perhaps humility is one way that we can tackle our struggles with who we are. Okay, and our final question actually is, what would you tell 15-year-old Jonathan today if you could?
I think I would tell 15 I think I would tell 15-year-old Jonathan that it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to not fit in, because that's what makes you special. And I think that's something that empowers me today still, to acknowledge the fact that I'm uniquely and wonderfully created, and there's a specific role in this world and society that I can play that no one else can. There's a role in someone else's life, a difference in someone else's life that I can create and no one else can, be it to assist them in their finances or to just love them and befriend them as a friend in a manner that no other human being can, and I'm special that way. I think it empowers me today to be myself, to not fall back to my own safety zones where, like, okay, everyone has done things a certain way, hence you should do it too, even though it's unnatural for yourself. But to remind the 15-year-old Jonathan that whatever pain you're feeling today, someone else is probably feeling it too. Whatever struggles you have today, it's valid. And because it's valid, own it and overcome it in your own capacity and whatever feels right for yourself. Because it's tough to be alone. It's tough to resolve problems in a manner that isn't the norm in society. But if you don't do that, you're not allowing yourself to grow. You're not maximizing your own potential, and you're not able to find joy. You're just going to feel so suffocated in that process. So the earlier you acknowledge your weaknesses, the earlier you are comfortable with your own skin and limitations, the earlier you can truly love people around you and truly live a life that you are proud to live. Yeah, that's what I would tell 15-year-old Jonathan.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, before we draw the interview to an end, is there anything else you would like to share that you haven't managed to through the questions? Anything at all?
I guess I can share a little bit more about what I hope to do in the future, because I'm doing 3 seemingly random things in my life right now, and I think to many people it may seem like, oh, this Jonathan guy is distracted as always and as lost as always. But I think something that that brings these 3 points together is my love for humanity, my love for people to figure out their adulting journey. Because as someone who just graduated a year ago, who just got married half a year ago, who was in my mid-20s in Singapore, it's so tough to be an adult. There's so much to worry about, so many things to understand and master within such a short span of time. And it's confusing, it's excruciatingly tough. Yeah, but I just hope that I can help people feel less alone along this way, be it through my profession as a financial advisor, as a wedding videographer who creates content about marriage, as someone who links people with experts in the working field. I hope to bring people along this journey to help them realize that you don't have to be alone in your struggles. It's okay to acknowledge your pain today, and by supporting each other together, we can live life more meaningfully. We can enjoy this phase of our lives much more. We don't have to cry alone in bed, and we can unlock our own potential when someone else is supporting our weaknesses. Yeah, so that's who I am today, and that's what I'm trying to do for the people around me today. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for sharing.
Pleasure. Thank
awesome
you.
To get to know you more.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for questioning me.
Questioning you, that sounds so...
For helping people understand who I am better through your very insightful questions.